this session is really about the question, why are you leaving academia? That may or may not come up in interviews, but obviously I think sometimes weighs heavily on people's minds in terms of, you may be conflicted by the choices that you're making for whatever reason. How do you manage that process in an interview scenario? I'm Dr. Joseph Barber. I'm the Director of Graduate Career Initiatives here at Penn Career Services. But let's think about this question and in terms of, why are you leaving academia? And before I sort of get to that, I want to sort of make sure that we have a sort of a solid foundation to think about the context of this question. If you have been invited to an interview, remember that already means that the hiring manager or the committee or whoever it is sees value in your experience, in your skills, in your knowledge area, right? They wouldn't invite you to interview just because they need people to interview. They invite people to interview because there's potential there based on something that you've done. So that's important to know, because you should frame, thinking about interview questions optimistically. You are trying to confirm that you have that potential, those skills that they're interested in, but they already have that interest. They've taken the first steps to reaching out to you. If you've found a job and put your materials together and applied for it and have accepted the invitation to an interview, then my recommendation is that you try to make sure that you get through as much of the process as possible to get an offer, and then decide if it's the right offer for you, right? So I think sometimes people are again conflicted in this process. I'm not sure if this is the right role for me. And obviously, if there are red flags and there are things about an organizational role that are just not good and you don't want to be anywhere near, then pull out straight away and move on. But if you're uncertain, then I would say that see it through to the end of the process. And if you do get an offer, then you get to choose. You get to choose to say yes, or you get to choose to say no. If you sort of talk yourself out of the process, you won't get an offer, and then you don't get to choose, right? So that's important, because both of these concepts reflect on how to address this question of, why are you leaving academia? Because it's, for some people, an emotionally charged question, and for some people, it's a very straightforward question. So we're going to dabble in that, right? So if looking at this question sort of gives you, the shudders or shivers because it's been weighing on your mind, then that's okay. It's very normal. It's very natural for people to be conflicted about what's going on. And we can sort of explore this in slightly different ways, right? One of the reasons that I think it seems like such a big question is the way that academia frames the faculty path and everything else as being very different, different directions, polar opposites almost in terms of what they're doing. And that's not actually very accurate. It may feel that way sometimes, but it's, the faculty path is just one of many career paths that people take with a doctoral degree, with, using their postdoc, whatever that looks like. It's sort of an artificial dichotomy to have them be very distinct approaches. The skills that you're using may look different. The way that you apply may look different. But the nature of it being a job that pays you is much the same, right? So this is much less of an accurate image, and this is more of an accurate image. There are many career paths, some of which intersect with each other at different points in time, some of which have off-ramps and on-ramps to be able to switch between those. So don't see it as this big choice between something X and Y in your mind, because this will help when it comes to the interview question itself. Imagine PhD does a good job, I think, of framing up the faculty path as just one of many paths, right? So this is Imagine PhD is a tool for PhDs, doctoral students maybe in the humanities and social sciences. And these are the job families that are common paths taken by people with a background in these areas. Faculty is not distinct from, it's just one of many, right? And that's a good way of thinking about it, because that's important to how you build your narrative moving forward. Because the question of why are you leaving academia, when seen from a different perspective, could also be framed as, why are you not leaving academia, right? So someone who has left academia, who has a doctoral degree, may look at people in academia and say, well, what? Look, this is great over here. Why aren't you leaving, right? So the question itself doesn't have to be as significant, because people see it from different perspectives. But here's why I think it can be challenging, right? So maybe you are leaving the faculty path because you don't have choices to stay in it, or at least you don't feel that you have choices, right? You want to stay in it, but there just aren't enough positions each year for everyone to get a job. You don't feel competitive enough. And this is where, your imposter syndrome, or everyone's imposter syndrome, may play a role. If you're at Penn doing great research, which you are, then you will be competitive, but still a limited number of opportunities and lots of people who are competitive means it's challenging. You want a faculty role, but you don't want to have to move. Maybe you have family here, maybe you're settled here, maybe you just like it here and you don't want to have to go to another institution, especially not for a 2-year visiting assistant professor position and then move from there as well. Maybe you'd like to earn more money, right? You can see all the salaries for faculty roles on the Chronicle for Higher Education salary tool. So you can get a sense of what that looks like. And then you can compare those with other paths and see that they are different, some higher, some lower. You may have a partner who has just got a job as a faculty member, but the likelihood of you getting a job in the vicinity, in a academic setting may be hard. So these are hard situations to sort of grapple with because you have set up your program, your research to be positioned for that, and now you're going to make a choice, another decision to sort of explore your opportunities. So it's not that you don't want to do it; you really do. It's just that you realize that the likelihood of success is uncertain. What I would say to you in this situation is to remember that what you are actually doing by making a choice to explore your options and go somewhere else and apply for other jobs and interview for those jobs, you are advocating for and prioritizing your personal wellness, your emotional wellness, your professional wellness, your financial wellness, right? So it is a deviation from a path that you had anticipated, but it's also important to realize that making important choices about the future for you and those around you is still it's a good reason to make a choice. Other people may be leaving academia as a whole from their experience because they had a very negative experience. And I don't want to sort of downplay the experiences that people have here, but some, I've met with students and postdocs who have not had a good time throughout their doctoral degree or their postdoc, and have experienced significant hardships and emotional distress as part of that journey. And so anything is obviously better than continuing on in that path. This is important, obviously, because what you feel when someone says, why are you leaving academia? If you've had this negative experience, what your brain starts churning over is going to be very raw emotional content, and being able to sort of process that internally so that you can give an answer that is separate from the emotion, but still authentic to your experience, that's going to be important, right? Sharing the emotional stuff is not something that in a job interview is going to be your ideal scenario. And so making sure that you've worked through the sort of the narrative in your mind about what you will say ahead of time is going to be a key part of that process. Some of the feelings then that people can have about leaving academia that do churn up inside, you may be disappointed that you can't continue on. You may be frustrated that you invested all this time, but there are few opportunities. You may also be exhausted, right? That's a feeling too. I've worked so hard and academia is sucky, or it's not giving me what I need. For some people, there's a sense that you are letting yourself down or other people down, whether that's your advisor or your family or friends who you told you were going to be a professor when you first started your PhD. Obviously that's a relevant experience, but you're never letting yourself down when you're prioritizing what's important to you moving forward, right? So whatever their feelings are aside, they're not more important than your feelings and your wellness as part of this process. So yes, it's still something that you feel, but it's not something that I think you need to worry about. It makes it sound too flippant, but I think you can understand that by prioritizing your own professional and emotional wellness, you're doing a good job. But there are also other feelings, right? So that's leaving a sort of an idea, leaving a place where you've been, leaving an idea that you had about what you were going to be. But then there are feelings also that are associated with moving towards something else, something new, something different, something familiar to a certain extent, or adjacent to that plan that you had. And there are feelings like nervousness, like anticipation, like excitement, like uncertainty. Each of these bring with it a slightly different type of energy, right? These are energizing emotions. They are setting yourself up for action, as opposed to the other emotions in the blue box here, which are oftentimes dragging you down emotions, right? They are a lack of energy, or energy has been expended in that situation. So again, these are things to think about, because as we think about the question of why you're leaving academia, the goal is going to be to sort of avoid being caught up in the negative experiences, but to prioritize talking about the more positive experiences that you might have. So, some of the narratives that you might already have or begin to have about why you're looking for these new roles that are out there include some of these, right? These are just ones that I came up with. You want something new, right? You have all these skills, but you want to have an impact somewhere, and you don't feel that maybe academia has that. So you want to look for opportunities where you can do that. Maybe you just want faster environments. Maybe you want higher pay, right? These are all things that are energizing as you think about those moving forward. And then sometimes you realize that you've gone through your doctoral program or your postdoc and you realize, you know what, I don't actually enjoy this as much as I thought I did, but I do enjoy this. And you really identified the skill or the experience or the thing that you want. And when you know that experience, when you know this thing gives you energy, you can invest time into sort of creating a narrative that says, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an opportunity to do this because I know now from this past experience that this is what I want to do. Right? You know, that experience of my doctoral program, everything else has given me this insight moving forward. These narratives are, again, they're sort of more optimistic narratives, and they're more of the things that I think you want to integrate into an answer around the question of, you know, why are you leaving academia? So, you know, that in this timeline, as you are thinking about the answer that you might have to this question, and someone in an, you know, someone at an employer asks you this in an interview, obviously what they are interested in more when they're asked this question is more along the lines of why you are applying than why you are leaving, right? They don't know why you started your program. They don't know your experience. They don't necessarily need to know any of that, but they do kind of need to know why you are now wanting to sort of put yourself in this position at this new organization. And so, as we saw from the sort of the breakdown earlier, the why you're applying are all of these anticipation sort of energies that you're trying to bring into your answer. They are the I want this because it's this, not I want this because it's not that, right? And so you have to be very careful to sort of make a distinction, a sort of a clean break between what the past has been and what the future is going to be. And you can leverage the past as a foundation for why the future is, why this direction, this new direction that you're taking is what you want, but it's only a foundation. It's not the narrative itself. So let me try to sort of illustrate what this looks like in slightly more structured ways. So the way that I would approach a question, why are you leaving academia, is first of all, I would try to acknowledge what was so good about it. And I was going to say great, but say what's so great about it. Again, realizing that some people have not had a great time at all. Even within that not great time, there are certain times when you may have experienced energy, positive or just energy. It's worth highlighting some of those things because it changes the narrative from leaving to saying, I'm not leaving, I'm leveraging, I'm taking what I've learned and now I'm applying. So if someone says, why are you leaving? You can suddenly say, well, you know, what I've really enjoyed about my doctoral program is that I've been able to really you know, gain research skills or really hone my communication skills to take complex information moving forward. And I've enjoyed that, right? So you're going to frame as much as you can from your own experience, the best things about the doctoral degree that overlap slightly with the thing that you're applying for. Then you can sort of say, you can sort of reflect on what you've learned about yourself, right? You know, even as part of my doctoral program, I've taken every opportunity to look for opportunities to do this, you know, to have this experience. And I found myself really enjoying that and really being able to add value to those student groups or to that initiative that I was part of. That's your middle part. And then you're going to move into the sort of and so that's why I'm excited about this role, because I see opportunities for me to continue to bring those skills to life and continue to focus on those areas. So really it's you know, these are three ways of walking yourself through this process, keeping you very much focused on the positive and anticipatory behaviors and away from the things that were a negative experience for you. What I enjoyed about it was this, what I've learned about myself is this, and what I want to do with what I've learned and what I've enjoyed is now this thing that I'm interviewing for. So I'm so excited by that. So here's sort of just a general example, very generic, obviously, because again, not focusing on a specific career field or background. What I enjoyed most about my experience is being creative, pushing new boundaries, gaining a very deep knowledge, having the opportunity to be able to do that. And then you can sort of broaden that out and say, but I've always looked for opportunities to do this, or I've been part of a student group to do that. And that's where I've really understood how my experiences and my value, how my experiences and my skills have value, right? So I see this a lot when people have joined the PPG Healthcare Consulting Club. They've done some consulting projects and they say, I really enjoyed that. I didn't know I would enjoy it so much, but I'm able to use my knowledge, right? I'm able to use this skill to be effective in that role. So this is your part one to this answer. And then part two sort of begins to frame it back to why this is a sort of good fit for the role that you're interviewing for. I've done some work to understand this field that I'm applying for. I've spoken to people at career fairs. I've done networking. I understand some of the nuances of this role. And so the foundation that I have for my doctoral degree, the skills that I gained on my own time, and my interest and passion for this is why I'm here, right? So you're not really leaving, you are moving towards. That is sort of the goal that you're trying to achieve with this type of answer. Now, for some people, going back to my talking out loud from the last presentation slide, it won't feel natural the first time, right? Especially if it's very raw, it feels very raw that you're making this choice and it does feel to you like you're leaving something. What you need to do is to say out loud some of these approaches to this question, right? Some of your answers, because again, it will help you believe it over time. You have to sort of, say it to yourself as it were, but say it out loud so that you can believe it too. And you only have to believe it in terms of where you are in the interview. You may always feel like, you've left something behind and, I can't change that. Maybe it doesn't need to be changed. But in an interview scenario, you do want to be fairly strategic about how you're positioning yourself for that role. Because again, the goal is to get an offer and decide if it's the right offer for you, and sort of tripping up over a question about why you're leaving and focusing too much on what you've left behind isn't necessarily going to give them get them excited about what you bring to the role. So the goal for your interview is to get to the process where you have an offer, or get to the part of the process where you have the offer, and then make a decision about that. So this sort of speaks to the idea that this is the narrative that you're creating for an interview. It's just one of many narratives about you, right? So if you were speaking to someone in a role far beyond academia and they asked you this question, you could give them an answer that sounded like the one I just gave you. If you were speaking then the next day to a faculty member who reached out and said, oh, our department does have a position, you can have a totally different narrative about how excited you are to be a faculty member, right? That potential exists there. Those two versions of yourself can exist at the same time. They are just different narratives used in different ways. That's okay. It's okay to have different narratives. Being authentic means not making up, the experience. It wasn't all great, it wasn't all bad, but there are always things that you can identify about the experience that I think you can point to that add value. Because the idea is, if you have a doctoral degree, you want to definitely make sure that it's seen as valuable by people who are interviewing you. So underplaying it or saying that the whole thing was terrible doesn't necessarily add value to it. You've gone through the hard work to get one. It's worth sort of thinking about what that looks like. And if you have networked with people doing informational interviews, and you've asked them about their experiences, moving from their doctoral program to a role outside of academia, you've probably shared a little bit about your own journey too with them in this informal setting. And so some of these people are going to be part of your future potential, interviewing committees, as it were, and they will know the authentic version of you and how proactive you've been and how you're going through this. That's part of the process. Someone asked if it's okay to mention salary as one of the reasons for leaving. Yes, but no one's going to give you a salary until they know that you have something valuable to bring, right? So if you are first able to demonstrate what you bring to the role, and then say, I'm also just really excited to know that, for doing this type of work, there's great compensation for that. That's a big motivator for me. That's fine. So always preempting what you bring first and what you gain second is the way to do that. But in other types of roles, salary is higher, and it's not a secret, as it were. You can find out what those differences are, but it can't be the only driving factor, because everyone would like a job that paid lots of money, but they also have to do the job in order to get that money. So here's some of the good news, though, that I think that relates to this question. I don't actually think you'll be asked this question an awful lot. I think people worry that they'll be asked the question, and I think you should be ready to answer the question. But I don't think it comes up in many interviews. And here's some of the reasons why. For many roles that need a PhD or a doctoral degree, there's no real reason why you have to explain why you're leaving, because it's a pathway. If you're an engineer, you may go into an engineering role. If you're a research scientist, you may go into a scientist role. If you're an economist, PhD, you may go into an economist. If you're in higher education or EDD, you may go into higher education, right? There's no real narrative there that requires you to say, I'm leaving. You're just saying, I'm taking what I've learned and I'm applying it. You're also going to be speaking in these types of roles with other people with doctoral degrees. They've already left. They've left a long time ago. To them, it's not a big issue anymore. They're happy they're left. They're doing the thing that they want to do. So you don't need to justify to them. you do need to demonstrate that you have an awareness of their environment is going to be slightly different from the environment that you're leaving, right? So this is where your networking, your background research are going to be important. But you don't have to justify, because they're already out and they're already doing their own thing. They just need to know that you are excited by that thing, that version of the thing, not the version that you're sort of moving from, as it were. For roles where a PhD is not required, but is valued or preferred or not even mentioned, you may be speaking with people during the interview who have advanced degrees and some people who don't as part of that process. If people don't have doctoral degrees, then they've never really had to grapple with the idea of leaving academia. So it's not really a question that necessarily pops into mind as something that's important to ask, because it's not something that they've experienced or care about from their perspective. So it's unlikely then to come up as one of the main priorities. Now, if an organization has had a bad experience with a doctoral candidate who left because they wanted to go back to the faculty or wasn't able to use their skills effectively, they may want to double check that you understand the nature of the role and the things that you can bring to it. So in these scenarios, again, that they may not ask you because it's not a question that weighs heavily on their minds as much as it weighs heavily on your advisor's mind or on your mind. So when you do think about your PhD then make sure that you are framing up some of the value-added aspects of the PhD, right? Making sure that you talk about how you can learn things quickly and grapple with communication approaches and have resilience, right? We talked about perseverance and resilience as being things that are critical to a doctoral experience. Those things are also critical outside. And so even if you can demonstrate that it was a tough experience, but you got through it, that's a characteristic that can be valuable in any role that you may be applying to. Now, that's the fundamental sort of aspects to answering that question that I shared there. There are similar questions that sort of have the same sort of connection with your past and your future. The why do you want the job? We talked about this in the last session. Obviously, the reason you want the job is because you have the skills and experience and some of the experience to do it, not because you don't want the other job, right? So that's an important distinction to make. I really don't want to be in academia anymore. There's no jobs, and so that's why I'm here. Is not the narrative that's going to get the interviewers excited about you. So why do you want the job is all about because what you're looking for is this, and what I bring is this. What aspects of your research are most relevant? So that might come up in the interview. Again, trying to disentangle the experience of research as a doctoral candidate or a postdoc, and just talk about the skills used to do that is going to be important there. So you don't get caught up in the academic aspects of the research. Again, how does your academic experience translate to this role? Could talk about teaching, could talk about the things that you've done outside of your lab or outside of your research, lots of ways to frame that up in positive ways. A lot of interviews include the question, as you look at the job description, what is the most challenging aspect? What are you most concerned about in this job description as you think about that? And that's worth thinking about. My suggestion for this type of question is to pick something that is a knowledge-based concern, not a skills-based concern. So you might say, well, I've never actually worked in this setting with these types of organizations. So I'd have a lot to get up to speed with quickly to figure out who the stakeholders are and what these clients are and what this industry represents. However, learning things quickly is something that I'm really great at. And here's an example from my doctoral program where I had to learn a whole new subject in 2 weeks in order to give a presentation on it as part of a course that I was teaching. Right, so if you pick something that's informational or knowledge-based, you can change that quickly just with a bit of experience. If you say, well, actually, I'm no good at computer programming and it's a software engineering role, then that's going to be a bit more of an issue, right? Because that's something that you can't really fix quickly. So knowledge or experience in, with the people or the situations, that's something that you can fix. And then tell me about your research. May pop up in jobs outside of research roles. And so, here's my quiz for you. When someone asks you about your doctoral research, do you talk for 5 to 10 minutes about your research? Tell them that your research is absolutely not relevant and you're looking for this job. Shudder visibly because your research has been challenging, or provide a quick summary that gives them something positive to remember you by. Obviously, my suggestion would be D here, because your research is interesting. Lots of people don't have the opportunity to focus in on something and learn all about these things and find answers to questions. my research was on chickens. I've used chickens as my sort of sub-narrative for a lot of the time because it helps people remember who I am. Do I want to be the chicken person all the time? Not necessarily, but it's a small part of the narrative that I create. Now, if your research involves dissecting small animals, or you're doing a subject on 17th century diseases that ravaged arts communities across Europe, and it's all gruesome and not gruesome in a bad way, but it's something that people aren't necessarily used to hearing about on a day-to-day, then find a way to make sure that your research is meaningful and accessible to your interviewer, but perhaps don't go into all the details of all the sort of the stuff that other people may not have familiarity with and may not want to know about on a day-to-day basis. So that's just a caveat to talk about your research, is making it accessible to people in different ways. On our website, you have our learn how to do interviews resources. Big interviews is a great way to practice out loud and then hear yourself respond to those questions. Especially, you can have that while you're leaving academia, and you can practice it and practicing it over and over again if you want to. One of their question sets is on uncomfortable questions. Come on, do you really think you're qualified for this position? So you can practice a few of those if you just want to be put on your to see how you think on your feet, and when it comes to these types of things. The Aurora platform is really great because it is centered around doctoral students and postdocs. So their advice is very much aligned with what you might be experiencing in an interview. So these types of questions that you might face about academia and leaving it and transitioning are likely to come up in some of their resources too. Our interviewing guide is a very quick read. So if you need something, quick update before an interview coming up, you might find some value in this guide. LinkedIn is not going to have any information about questions about leaving academia. So this is, again, just generally information that you might find helpful as part of this process that you're going through.